Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's morning somewhere.
It
It's
is.
true.
If we have any of our UK peeps, it's morning.
That's right. So, hey, thanks for being here. I was like messing around with stuff, and then all of a sudden, my computer is flashing at me saying, "Don't you have something to do? Don't you have a button to press?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, I do. I do have a button to
It's
press."
8 p.m.
The button is, "Hello, everybody. Glad you're here." The button to let all the people in. I just realized, oh, good, you've got something to drink.
I do.
Because I forgot to fill up my water bottle. So, how about that?
Digger Aquatics. Hey.
Hello.
It says, thanks to everyone who attended the Quad City Swap. It was a huge crowd.
Yes, it was.
Yes,
We'll get to that in
it
a
was.
few minutes for sure. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Do want to say right from the start, I did talk with John. Lisa's doing well. So, KG Tropicals, John and Lisa. So that's good to hear.
Good.
And hopefully they will be back next week as usual. So really happy to hear that. Okay, so things we're talking about tonight. I thought it would be fun to kind of go down a memory lane. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. In fact, most of our time tonight, we will have lots of time to do our typical Q&A. So I'm looking forward to that. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about just kind of how fish keeping has changed over the years since the 1970s. And we'll just kind of march through the decades a little bit and talk about some of the different things that have happened. And this is a time where I think it's going to be fun to hear from you in the chat or later on if you're watching this on replay in the comment section. What do you remember? Because I'm literally just going off of my memory. And obviously, the 1970s, I was a little kid. So, and, we had a lot of family members who had aquariums. Mm-hmm. So, that, I have that in my brain.
I don't have any of that in my brain.
You are missing out on life.
I kind of am.
By the time we get to the 80s, I think what was going on in my brain was a little bit more solidified. Of course, by the 90s, I'm not even a teenager anymore. So, or at least most of the 90s, I wasn't a teenager. Yeah. So, I thought that would be a lot of fun. But before we get into all of that awesome stuff, just want to say hello to everybody here and our moderators. I see Lynn is here. I see Noelle is here. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Morning.
Whip is in the house
you just
too.
had me saying morning. I just said morning.
You did.
Because you said morning. Oh my gosh. Good evening.
Yeah.
Whip.
So, very cool that you're here. Videos that have come out this past week on Sunday. I did a long-term update on the Oaza Biomaster 850 Thermo.
Okay.
That is the canister filter that I have running on both of the 125s that you see behind us. And I have the smaller version, although right now the size escapes me. I don't know if it might be the 350 on the 50-gallon lowboy. So those things, after over a year, I always say when I do a product review, I often do an initial unboxing, initial impressions, things that look like they're going to be great, things that I don't know if there's any initial concerns, but then I wait at least a year and we say, okay, what's it done over the last 12 months? And as what I normally do is I try to put these pieces of equipment really through the paces. And so I give them a tough task, if you will. And so that's what I did over the last year. On Sunday as well, on Container Joy, you did a plant video, some plants from...
Plants of the Bible.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I thought it was very interesting. There was one big surprise.
And you totally nailed it with the music, too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you have a gift for that. I don't do that as well.
It's literally my favorite thing to do in a video is to find the right... If I find the right music, I'm a happy camper. If I don't, I'm not a happy camper. Yeah, it's true.
Wow.
That's a little fun fact.
I think you put a lot more thought into it than I am capable of putting into it.
Yes.
It's definitely a weakness of mine. Monday, Tank Talk podcast. It was one of those subjects. This was John's idea. And he was like, hey, I have an idea for a podcast. He's like, we're going to talk about aquarium stands. And in my head, this is what I'm doing when I see the thing. I'm like, oh, how? What are we going to talk about for an hour? Do you know that podcast went like almost an hour and 20 minutes? And I think we could have talked about that subject for 3 hours. I mean, If you want to know just about everything there is to know about aquarium stands, you need to watch that podcast. I was so happy after we got through that. I was like, wow, we really covered pretty much everything there is to know about aquarium stands. And what's cool is, I don't know if many of you know this, but John from KG Tropicals, who is my partner in this wonderful Tank Talk podcast, I consider him like an expert. He's an expert woodworker. That's what he did as a profession. Basically, even when he was doing YouTube back in the early days, he was.
I always forget
yeah.
that.
And he's got his other channel that he does, the Money Pit, where he's like redoing his kitchen. So he's got a lot to offer there. So it was really fun to get his opinion on that. So yeah, it was really cool. Let's see here. Wednesday on the small scape, I really enjoyed that video. That was yesterday.
Gosh, that's like 2 for 2.
I know. And what did you talk about?
What did I title it? Well, sometimes I'll like change the title. They're combos, but like kind of unique, cool, crazy combos. That was initial. Well, there are several inspirations, but the initial inspiration came from y'all because of the questions that we'll get. Like, hey, what's something different that we can have in this kind of tank or in that? So that was the initial, and then some great ideas that I heard at the weekend swap where I'm like, that would be a great combo.
Well, and what I liked about it is you actually have footage now of some of the fish that I don't have any footage of. Some of the gobies that we have. Oh my gosh, wait till you see.
Oh my
This video is worth seeing just because she got the dwarf mouth brooder,
Yes.
the Nichols mouth brooder.
Do you know how hard that was?
And he's usually pretty shy, and he's in that 75 gallon over there. I made a tremendous mistake. Well, so mistake number one, can I just share with you a couple mistakes that I made? Mistake number one is I brought in about 60 of these fish over a year ago, maybe even close to 2 years ago. Now, in my wisdom, I'm like, these fish are insanely gorgeous. Let me keep, I think I might have kept 5 or 6 initially, and they were in a 40-gallon breeder on the other side. And then when I broke that down and converted it to basically just another quarantine tank, I put those Nichols mouth brooders in the 75-gallon over here as kind of like a centerpiece. Well, when I pulled them out, I had 1 male, 2 females. Now, as the name implies, they are mouth-brooding fish. They are African cichlids, but they are not Great Lakes African cichlids. So they're essentially kind of like water parameters like a corbensis or a jewel cichlid, but the males, they get insane colors, the blue and the yellow. And now that fish is showing off in that 75-gallon. It looks insane. But the mistake I made, one of the females is holding. I can't get her out of there. There's no way, because when females are holding, they are very, very skittish. And so the minute I put a net in there and she goes flying behind the rocks, I will not see that fish again until she spits out the fry and all the barbs in that tank eat the fry. So that was a big mistake. What I've been trying to do ever since I sold all those fish is get them again. But I am having the hardest time finding them on the list. And the next time I do, I promise, I will get them in because
they're stunning.
They are really, really beautiful fish. So anyway, if you go to the small scape, check out that latest video. You'll see what I'm talking about with that fish. Today, prime timers, we talked about the 125. On Sunday, I have a really, really cool fish store tour for you. And I don't, a lot of times at this point, you walk into a fish store and you're like, okay, 99% of these fish I've seen before, 90%, maybe 95%. I've kept these fish, but I still think, okay, maybe the fish store has a really cool vibe. Their tanks are in really good shape, and it's fun for people to see some of these fish, especially if they've never kept them before. This store, different story. I walked in there, I'm like, there's a mess load of fish that I have never kept before, some I haven't seen in real life. I'm hoping you enjoy it. I think it's going to be pretty cool. So that is the land of videos. That's what's been going on this past week. I do want to say thank you very much, Dog, for the super chat. Hey guys, I have a 40 breeder that will be all Tanganyika, and I'm pretty set on Calvis. Are there any open water fish you would recommend for that setup? Yeah, for sure. Cyprichromis leptosoma. I did a species profile on them. I had those in a 40-gallon breeder with some shell dwellers, and that worked out fairly well. You could do Brichardi. They kind of sort of become open water. I would do the daffodils more than just the regular Brichardi. I think the daffodils have more color. And the nice thing is they both breed like crazy, but if you've got Calvis in them, they'll be like, yeah, okay, thanks for all the food, guys. So those would be the two options in that size tank.
Shane's Tanks and Bowl says, thanks, Jason and Joanna. The CPDs I picked up from you guys at the Quad City Swap are doing great and coloring up perfectly.
That is awesome to hear.
They are
Thank you.
showing great color already. When I was pulling them, I was like, oh,
Gravedigger mentioned this. So the Quad City Swap, first of all, for all of you who were there, for all of you who placed pre-orders and bought fish, thank you.
And stop by to say hi.
That swap in my head and my brain has the most potential of any swap I have ever been to, because they changed the location to the Bend Expo Center.
Yes.
In East Moline, Illinois, and it's really close to the river. This swap gave me Aquashella potential vibes. It's great. The parking is great.
Yeah.
The facility is super clean.
They have food.
Tons of space. And so if you haven't been to a Quad City Swap, here's what generally happens. Generally looking at least 2,000 people going through there in the first couple hours. And the old venue, which was still a nice venue, it was shoulder to shoulder from table to table. You could not move, right? It's like being in a nightclub or something where you're like, okay, this is good, but I'm a little crowded and this is freaking me out. So now they've got this larger footprint and it's very open, it's very airy, and there is space to grow. And I'm thinking for bigger vendors that want to have a place where in one day you can have a potential audience of I think that swap, there was over 3,000 people, which was probably a record. And I believe because even with this much larger footprint, people were walking through there and it was crazy. We sold out in, I don't even know, it was embarrassing, like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And I'm like,
people were coming by like did you bring
they're
anything?
kind of looking at us like, why are these people here with we had 3 tables and they're just selling a little bit of North Fin food and some tote bags. I'm like, well, we had fish, they're gone. So thank you to everybody. We will be at the Greater Chicago Cichlid Association swap on Sunday. That's in Northbrook, Illinois. That's another really awesome one. I absolutely love that swap. Costs $5 to get in, so that's nothing.
Is that the last one, or did they have one in May?
No, that's the last one. And so swap season is winding down for us, and I'm at the point in the swap season towards the end where I'm like, I need a break. We need a break, because swaps, as many of you know, we're up at anywhere between 3 o'clock in the morning, usually no later than about 4:15. And it is go time from the time we get up until the time we get home from the swap. And it's a very, very exhausting day. And it's rough when we have 2 of these in a row. So we had Quad on Sunday, GCCA this Sunday, and then we catch a break. We will not be at another swap until Greenwater Quail Society in Tinley Park. And that's not until the 17th of May, Saturday the 17th. So if you have not ordered and you are somebody who goes to the the GCCA swap, now would be the time to do that. We're actually sold out of probably at least a third, if not half of the fish that we had on the website. So they sold out pretty fast this time. So thank you for that. Okay. Now, Shane says, I heard there was 3,000 people that showed up at the Quad City. Easily. I mean, that place is very, very large, and it was packed. They had food there, and they had tables where people could actually sit, which was pretty nice. The vendor selection there, they upped their game. Because they were able to bring in more vendors, there was a lot of different kind of stuff there as well. So, really cool. Girl 88 says, are y'all going to be at Aquashella Dallas? Unfortunately, no.
Sounds so weird to say no.
Yeah, it'll be the first one I've ever missed. And since they started in 2018 when they were at the place where
Niles.
They were, Niles, yeah. So we will, as of right now, we are not planning to go to any of the Aquashellas. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Like I said, they've got new people kind of overseeing the thing, and they have to turn their attention to whatever they feel they need to turn their attention to. And so I'm not sure if, I don't know. I don't want to speak for all the other creators out there, but I haven't heard anybody is going to any of them unless they're maybe local, but we'll see. I mean, I hope they do well, because we need things like that to kind of bring excitement into the hobby. But unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be at any of them this year.
So far,
however,
so weird.
That being said, we are kind of shifting focus, and so I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. In June, like the 3rd week of June, the American Cichlid Association, along with the Live Bear Association, along with the American Killifish Association, I think it might even be the Abetta Association, they're all doing,
Wow.
so the ACA is in San Antonio, Texas in June. I'm going to be there. Joanna won't be there. I will be there, and I am really looking forward to that because I've never been to an ACA before. That should be a decent size thing because you've got so many different national associations kind of all headed there together.
I have to ask you a random question just because it's going to bother me the entire stream.
Okay.
What is that plant that you have in the bottom 40?
That is, believe it or not, that's guppy grass.
Really? Is it
Remember all that
planted or
guppy grass?
something?
No, remember all that
I mean-
guppy grass you pulled out of there? And you left
Yeah.
about this much? And a
That's
month
guppy
later,
grass
it's
for
half
ya.
filled up the tank again.
Really?
And it's, the way that it's grown, it's just kind of grown as a
It
plant that is
looks-
doing a crazy
It
thing.
looks like it's planted. That's
Yeah,
weird.
Pretty awesome.
Anyways.
All right, so can we, let's talk about what we want to talk about today.
Daniel
shall we?
Ingalls, that's so mean. Currently making vanilla ice cream root beer floats.
That is awesome. So here's the thing that I would like
yum.
to know from all of you, especially if you are old school fish keepers. I want to know how well I remember, because I legitimately don't want to provide like, not that it really matters, but like, trends from the 1970s in fish keeping. Oh, that's really going to impact your fish keeping experience. But here's how I remember the 1970s, and maybe
I think it's a fascinating topic.
yeah, so you can help me out on this, having not kept fish in the
I-
1970s. But you were alive. In fact, you were alive for the entire decade, where me, I wasn't.
Heck yeah, I missed
Yeah.
4.5 months of that whole
There's-
awesome
There's
decade.
practically almost a half a decade of age difference between us. So
Do you know that ever since I turned 40, I was in my 40s, like, oh, you're almost, no wait, I think I turned 41 or 42. Oh, you're almost 50. Same thing when I turned 50, I'm almost 60.
yeah. So
So then I was all excited to make fun of him when he joined the 50 club.
man,
And,
Yes.
and he was just really happy.
I love it because everybody should embrace whenever they turn
Yeah.
like a 30, 40, or 50 or 60, because then you could say things like, yeah, I did this. I accomplished this thing and I'm in my 50s, or I accomplished this thing and I'm in my whatevers. You should take advantage of that, and
Sure.
I do. So it is something that I am quite happy with. All right, 1970s.
Pink
Here's how I
Floyd.
remember it. Imagine all these people. Get it? That's the 1970s. So in fish keeping in the 1970s, it was very different than it is today. In fish keeping in the 1970s, you had a lot of metal frame tanks. That was still a thing. I remember the first couple of aquariums that I had. There was a 20 gallon and there was a 10 gallon, and both of those were metal frame tanks that I don't think we bought either one of those new. In fact, I think like an uncle gave us both of those aquariums. And the 20 gallon had this brushed on gold patterned background. So this, you got to kind of imagine this thing. I don't have pictures of any of this stuff, so it's time to use our imagination, children. So that was one aspect. And then almost every tank that we had colored gravel. I don't remember going to the store and seeing a whole lot of, hey, let's go ahead and do this natural aquascape. Those things existed back then, to be sure. However, it was metal frame tanks on metal stands. That was primarily what you had. But the interesting thing was when it came to the equipment, it was much different than what most of us have today. And so and yes, aquariums maintain slate bottoms were also, mine were not slate bottom. Mine were glass bottom, but the slate bottom tanks definitely were a thing. And those were a little bit heavier, as you could imagine. So the equipment was interesting because filtration, I mentioned this about a month ago, were box filters. And so imagine a sponge filter, only it's plastic and it kind of sits in the corner, and bottom part is usually carbon or something, and then top part is usually floss. So that was the filtration. At least that's what we were running in the 1970s. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, people who remember the 70s, but the heaters, they were not fully, at least the most of them were not fully submersible from what I can remember. They were actually heaters where they were like hang on the back heaters, where you clamped it to the frame and then the cord would run off the back, but those were not fully submergible. That would have been a bad idea, at least for those heaters. And they were, gosh, I can remember learning an important lesson, and that is don't pull the heater out of the tank while it's still plugged in, because they're pretty hot. But the other aspect of this, and it's kind of interesting, the lighting usually was a metal top light not plastic. It was often like just like a metal, a polished metal sort of thing. But the lights themselves were just light bulbs. Like just screw on, like, oh, like here's my lamp, incandescent light bulb. That's what you had. So, another fun fact, if you were catching fish out of a tank and you were, you had a net and you put your forearm up against that light housing, it got really hot really fast. And so you learn two important lessons as a youngling. Be careful with electricity and heat, because heaters are hot, and those lights, especially those top incandescent lights, were really hot because it was just a metal frame that was covering that, and that was brutal.
Tank Girl says, I remember using the lights as heaters. There you go.
Yes. And so that was my other point is when you did that, those lights in and of themselves would heat the tank. And so then you might have like a little bit of a fluctuation, especially if you had a smaller tank and a decent sized light bulb, like a 10 gallon, you might start to see some temperature fluctuations there. Decorating the tanks, to me, like I said, it was almost always color gravel.
Yeah.
Maybe it was because I was a kid, but my uncles, and I had two uncles on both sides of the family, and one of the uncles had quite a few tanks in his basement. The other one had a number in his basement as well. But they all seemed to have just random color gravel, a lot of light blue, a lot of red. I see M&C says, I still have one of those old air pumps. I do. Oh, man. There's one up on the shelf over there. Oh, dang it. So, or is it, hold on. Well, that's a really old one. But anyway, the old Whisper air pumps, and they would make a little bit of bzzz. That was always fun, too. But that was 1970s. Plastic plants were a thing. You just threw in all your plastic plants in different sizes. How many of you, if you kept fish, had the ceramic no fishing sign in your aquarium? I had that was like a thing that you did, right? The ceramic no fishing sign. And then it was almost a guarantee in at least one tank. You're talking about the air pump. Mm-hmm. You either had the bubble chest that would bubble and would open up and
absolutely,
or you had the scuba diver where the bubbles would come out of his head.
Yeah. If you're lucky, you had both.
What's that?
If you're lucky, you'd have both.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then, so that was really interesting. But the fish selection, from what I can remember, it was a lot of live bears, a lot of guppies, platies, mollies, swordtails. But back then, those fish were truly very, very hardy fish. It wasn't like now where we're talking about, oh man, if you get guppies from the wrong source, they all die. They just weren't inbred the way they are now. Same thing with your mollies. That was not an issue back in the day where mollies would just do that, clamp fins. They would do the death wobble. That wasn't nearly as common. Swordtails all basically did really well. Red tail rainbow sharks were really popular back then. Chinese algae eaters. That was pretty much a go-to when it came to, oh, you've got an algae problem in your aquarium, throw a couple of these bad boys in there. And so now you got this 20-gallon tank. Like, well, I put 4 Chinese algae eaters in this thing. I'm sure that'll turn out fine. And of course, if they live long enough, that was going to be debatable, but it didn't matter because your tank, at least my tanks were, I think back to them, I remember having like 20-gallon tanks. We had a 35-gallon, we had a 10-gallon, and that 20-gallon having a blue gourami, a red-tailed shark, some swordtails, a few Chinese algae eaters, some type of cory cat. I'm pretty sure they were just your common green cory cat. What else was in there? I mean, it was a weird mix.
Did you have just like one cory cat too?
Yes, because it wasn't. They didn't really.
You didn't watch Primetime Aquatics back then, did you?
No, we didn't. But the other thing that we would do that was fun is we would go out and catch guppies in the puddles and stuff around the creeks by our house, and so we would chuck those in there. Those did really, really well. That was always fun. So that was pretty cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else from the 1970s that I remember. Anybody else? Is there anybody else that remembers cool things from the 1970s? 1970s would have been a lot of plastic caves, right? So that was a must. You have to have your castle or something like that.
Yes, I love the castles.
Back in the 1970s, you start to see, again, from my perspective, cichlids started to become a thing. right? Especially the Mbuna cichlids. I can remember going to the store with my dad, and that was about the time, especially when we had the 35-gallon, where it was like, oh, there's these really colorful fish. They're just as colorful as saltwater. And by the 1980s, things were still on the colorful side. Color gravel, colorful plants. But the one thing that I think happened more in the 80s was the backgrounds. Just like the store-bought, but it had a scene. It wasn't, I mean, I guess you could flip it over and it would still be solid, but most people actually use the underwater scene.
Of course.
And you tape that to the back. But the other things that started to happen in the 1980s was the switch, really the full switch from metal frame tanks, but there was a lot of wood frame, right? Because at the same time that the metal frame tanks are going away, so are the reliance upon metal stands. And so now you've got this situation where it's like, okay, we're offering more wood stands, but it would look really weird on a metal frame tank. All right, so I'm not sure what happened first. I'm not sure if it was the tanks were too expensive as metal frame, and so they moved to the plastic frames and decided, okay, well, let's also make these wood stands. And then it was like the wood grain stands. So that was kind of a shift away from, and I guess that would have been in the 70s too, but more so, in my mind, it just seemed like more so in the 1980s. Ted, you're absolutely right. Silver dollars. Hatchet fish were another big one. And so as we get into the 80s, the hatchet fish, I think, were more popular. By that point, cichlids were all the rage. I mean, you could get, there was a lot more Mbuna they were bringing in at that point. A lot of peacocks and haps were starting to make their way more readily. Oh my gosh, Dragon Dad, yes, the kissing gouramis. Those things were everywhere. And it would be like, oh, look at that, they're kissing, this and this great. You'd see pictures of like every Top Fin, Marine Land, whoever was out there. You'd be like, look at, there would always be the picture on their thing. And really, those fish aren't kissing, they're fighting. And they were mean.
Yeah.
Those,
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, those guys were pretty mean fish. So
they were like the poster child for fish keeping, like kind of like bettas are now, like for a package.
They were one of them.
Yeah.
They were one of them. I mean, all the gouramis were, not all, but the blues, the opalines, the golds, the kissing gouramis were certainly there. Like I said, hatchet fish in the 1980s were big. There were starting to be a bigger group, a bigger variety of cory cats at that point. So that was kind of cool. The filtration, I think, started to change a little bit. So we went from box filters. We started to see more reliance on hang-on-back filters, especially towards the late 80s. You just had a bigger selection there. By that point, the lights, they had gotten away from the metal cover of the lights, and it was mostly fluorescent lights with the plastic. And again, the plastic was often a wood grain plastic. They had a theme going back then, and that was just what they did. It's not that you couldn't find the black plastic lights, but the reliance on fluorescence, that was a huge jump. That, to me, that was a major improvement in the aquarium world because, one, the fluorescent lights were cooler, right, just temperature-wise. They didn't take as much energy, which was pretty nice, and they lasted longer. And to me, that was a nice jump when it comes to aquariums. Now, like I said, still a lot of color gravel, still a lot of color with the plants, still a lot of plastic. You still had the bubbly guys all over the place. That was pretty cool. I always like to look at, like, watch movies where there's fish tanks. So Christmas Vacation is one where they got the fish tank in the background. Goldfish were huge. I would say they were huge in the 70s and in the 80s. That was just, you go to the carnivals and you take your little ping pong thing, and we do that all the time. Just, okay, I want a goldfish. Just chuck it in the tank.
There was an episode, and I don't even know how this came up. The show, all right, old school peeps. The show with Brian Keith and Buffy. The little girl's name was Buffy. What was the name of that show? Do you remember? You probably don't even know. I don't know if he was a single dad. He might have been like a single dad. Anyways, there was an episode that I saw that they were at the fish store, and I think I tried to find this episode somewhere. Couldn't find it. I will, though. And they were at the fish store, and they were going from tank to tank. Like, you're on one side of the tank, they're on it, and you could see all the different fish. It was so cool because you're like, cool. Oh my gosh, that's a platy. Oh, yeah.
Well, and that and Mr. Mom.
Family Affair.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Dennis and Sherry.
Mr. Mom, they had a fish tank in their room, and that was like quintessential 1980s.
Surfing.
And of course,
Oh, yeah.
who can forget Lethal Weapon? Lethal Weapon 2, that would have been, right? Was it Lethal Weapon 2? Yeah. South Africa?
Yes.
Yeah. Just over there, shooting the breeze with your boss, shooting his fish. Yeah. Pick them up with your hands. JR, thank you so much for being a prime timer the last 5 months. Really appreciate it. Can I mix black-chinned live bears with guppies and tiger teddies? I have not kept the black-chinned live bear. They're not super big. I don't think they're super aggressive. I would think so. I mean, provided that you've got, let's say, a 20-gallon, maybe, to be safe.
You actually didn't read that entire comment.
Yeah, I did.
And I think that was
You can go ahead and read the last part of it.
Green Neon Crew Forever. I just want to make sure everybody saw it. That was
Well done. The Zen. I was born in the late 70s, so not that far back. Very nice. Yeah, so 1980s.
little youngster.
We are definitely, we're cichlids. We're moving, we're improving in our aquarium equipment.
Yeah.
Certainly by the mid to late 1980s, where I believe we're starting to see the submersible heaters, because I know I had my hexagon. That would have been very early 90s, and that I don't ever remember having a clamp-on heater at that point. They were all fully submersible heaters. That made a huge difference too. So that was pretty cool. A little bit more safe, if you will. 1980s, by the time I get to the 1980s, I have much better recollection. The other thing, you know what? The other thing that was really big in the 80s were hexagon tanks. Those were all the rage. You could find those fairly easily in the 1980s going into the 1990s. So, and they had them in all different sizes. I remember my uncle, now this could have been as far back, that tank could have been actually from the 70s. So it's not like they didn't have them going way, way back, but he had a 70-gallon hexagon tank in the corner of his basement, and that was really cool. He had angelfish in there. I had a 35-gallon hex, and I still get sentimental about that tank. It was the wood frame. It had the wood frame, fake wood frame light, and it had the fake wood stand. At some point, I'm telling you,
I know.
I would love in the gallery to do bookend 35-gallon hexes, one over here and one over here as you walk down. So then you have the hex, and then the rest of the tanks would be there. It'd be pretty awesome because you still have that symmetry.
MTS.
Hey,
huh?
I just think it would be cool. I can't help it. So what else? 1990s. I think by the 1990s, we're starting to see the wood grain is still there for sure, but the black frame tanks, and then of course the black painted stands are more popular by that point. The one thing I remember about the 1990s, it just seemed like there were more stores that were bringing in oddball fish.
Yeah.
And so, not that they weren't around in the 70s or 80s, but it just became a lot more popular where they were just bringing all these weird fish. I think by that point, maybe the stores just had better connections with the farms from overseas, but you started to see a lot more ghost knives and the dolphin fish and the freshwater whale, which was about this big. The elephant nose was definitely more prominent. A lot more of the eels were starting to come in. They were a little bit easier to find. I remember in my 35-gallon hex, I bought this eel, and it was about this big from a pet store, and I don't think they knew how big this thing was going to get. By the time it died, it was probably 14 or 15 inches, and I remember it being more of a pink color. I don't remember, but it had more of a rounded head. I was not home when that thing died.
Oh no.
And the person that was had to get this fish that had like rigor mortis set in. It was like
a stick. Yeah,
and it was all slimy and everything. Oh, it was great. It was really funny actually. But yeah, larger fish, as monster fish would be not that they weren't, again, they were around definitely in the 70s and 80s, but it just seemed like they were more popular. Larger tanks too. Not that there weren't really large tanks available in the 70s and 80s, but I think by the time the 90s rolled around, they were far more common. You could start to build aquariums a lot cheaper. And in the process, the glass was getting a little bit thinner, but there was a lot more, I think, tanks starting to come in from overseas. Back in the 80s, if somebody had a 55-gallon tank, That was like, whoa, you got a big fish tank. By the 90s, a lot more of the 6-foot tanks started to show up.
This is really funny. Can
Okay.
I read this? It's
Sure.
from Tim Adams. My parents would take us to the local fish store in Lake Geneva, Ken's Animal House, and drink beers while we walked around. Isn't that fun? That's funny. Lake
That's-
Geneva,
that's
great
very
place.
cool.
Lake Geneva.
Yep.
Just had to
Grave
give a
digger
shout
said
out.
I have the vintage shipwreck. Yeah, oh yeah, and the
Oh,
deep
yeah.
sea diver and my 8-gallon Metaframe. Just there you go. Now we're talking.
That's very interesting.
Yep.
No comment. I just find that interesting, and that's all I'm going to say.
All right then. So, yeah, 1990s. That was, I think, at that point too. Fish keeping just became a lot easier because you were starting to gain the. It just seemed to me that the people in the pet stores had a lot more knowledge. There's a lot of books out there, but again, this is pre-internet. Okay.
Yeah.
So all throughout the 70s and 80s and 90s, you are relying upon other people at a pet store. You're just assuming, okay, they work at this fish store, they must know a lot, and a lot of them did, but you were still getting a whole lot of misinformation, and there was very little way to deal with that until you figured out for yourself, oh, you know what? This fish gets a lot larger than they said it was going to get, or this fish is really mean, i.e. like the kissing gouramis or a red-tailed shark, or especially as the cichlids became a little bit more popular. I remember as an example, when we first started buying Mbuna cichlids, so first of all, we had a 35-gallon tank. That's not large enough for an Mbuna tank. So that's problem number one.
Yeah.
But again, this is the 1980s, so it wasn't as common to have larger tanks in the first place. So two things happened. One, I told the story before. My mom decided that she was going to set up this aquarium, and she was going to do a red, white, and blue gravel. But instead of mixing it all together, she had a red section, and the middle was white, and then the right-hand side was blue. I remember to this day. And she was really careful when she put in the fake plants and all that stuff to not mix the gravel at all. She wanted it to be like a flat, like red, white, and blue. So we go to the pet store, and my dad's like, okay, we got this 35-gallon tank, which at the time was the largest tank that we had. And he's like, we really like these super colorful fish. And they're like, okay, well, these are African cichlids. Awesome. The guy told us buy 2 of each kind. So back then, there wasn't nearly as many African cichlids available, but I specifically remember yellow labs, Aratus, the Johanny was available at that time, and the red zebra. So I'm pretty sure we bought 2 of every type of those.
Okay.
And they were pretty small, all right? So they were still pretty small. We get them home, and we get them in the tank. And within, I don't remember, it was a very short period of time. My mom's all mad, and she's like, these stupid fish. Of course, they did what cichlids do, and they mixed up all the gravel. So that was strike one. And then once they started to mature, and there was only 2 of each kind, well, they were pretty rough on one another. And as we now know, you overstock those tanks to reduce the aggression, but you need a large enough tank to deal with that, which a 35-gallon is not. What a mess. I also learned at that time, don't put bluegill in an African cichlid tank, even if the bluegill are like 4 times the size of the African cichlids. Within about 12 hours, I realized, oh my gosh, these bluegills need to get out of this tank and back into the creek where I found, or the little pond where I found them, because they're going to get messed up even worse than they are now.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was one of those things. It was just a tough thing. It really was. So I'm trying to think of other fish trends besides larger becoming more available, larger tanks becoming more available, oddball fish. I mean, there was some crazy stuff that you could get back in those days. That was when I first got the purple spot goby,
Really?
the ones that we have in the 125 over
Oh,
here.
I remember when you were always talking about them before you
Yeah.
had them.
That was, it was tough to find those guys.
Yeah.
That was a really cool fish. But yeah, I'm trying to, like the butterfly fish was out there by that point. I mean, it was probably out there before that, but you started seeing those, which was cool. They kind of hang out at the top. That was pretty awesome.
What was the first year that you ever found, that you ever heard about the anablepp?
Probably when, not because I saw them, and it wasn't a fish store thing. It was probably when I was teaching general zoology, and we were going over the ichthyology portion, and I'm pretty sure at some point a student had a picture of one in one of their student presentations. That's from what I
Really?
can remember, yeah.
First time I saw was at the
Cleveland Aquarium.
Cleveland Aquarium, and
Yep.
it was love.
Yep.
Love.
Leo asks, thank you for the super chat, appreciate it. Question on the new Fluval Aqua Clears, do you use the extension tubes even if it almost reaches the substrate? And what's your favorite heater? I would use it if I have no fish that dig, if it's sand. If I'm running a gravel tank, then I wouldn't worry about it as much. Then yeah, I'd probably run it out close to the bottom because it's going to have a greater likelihood of sucking up more stuff. But if I've got sand or I have fish that dig, I might not run it that far down. Favorite brand of heater? I'm still a fan of the Eheim heaters, the ones where you have to calibrate them. That's the only heaters that I really have in our fish room because our fish room is heated. So I'm not the greatest source in the world when it comes to like, oh, did I use a million heaters? I actually did because when we first set up the fish room, the tanks were heated, not the room. But then I was like, okay, once we set up this side, can't do that anymore. So I pulled most of the heaters out, but the Eheim heaters that I've had in the fish room now for the last 10 years, they've been running well. I really like them. I know some people say that the newer Eheims are not as reliable as the old ones, but they've just been workhorses for us. So really like them. Okay, by the 2000s, we are starting to see a shift because by the 2000s, we're starting to see the more natural look creep in a little bit. So even with the gravel and the substrate, I can specifically remember by the 2000s, you're starting to see a lot more tan.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There was still a lot of, kind of big gravel, old school gravel, but a lot more tan was starting to come in. Black gravel was becoming much more popular. The backgrounds of the tanks, now instead of selling those themes, right, like the underwater themes or the forest theme, you started to see a lot more really, really dark blue or black backgrounds that you would just tape on the back. By that point, the hang-on back filters were pretty darn solid, very reliable. Canister filters by that point, again, not that they hadn't been around before then, but you started to see more reliance upon those as well. By that point, you didn't see a whole lot of box filters, but the under gravel filter, I didn't really mention that, but the under gravel filter really in the 80s, certainly the 90s was super popular. Into the early 00s, maybe even the mid 00s was a very popular filter, mostly because it was cheap, and when suppliers supplied you with the under gravel filter, there wasn't a lot of cost because you still had to buy the air pump. So that was a thing in the early 00s. You started to see more plants. I think the planted tank, that was when people started to shift focus. Again, not that there weren't planted tanks around before then, but it was just a bigger focus. You started to see more cory cats, certainly, make their way into the land, and as well as more dwarf cichlids. So
Yeah.
Like the crebensis and the apistos were starting to make their way more readily into the hobby. Even some of the tetras, right? There was certainly more tetras, more barbs coming into the hobby, because I remember back, oh my gosh, unless I'm misremembering, and again, please feel free to chime on in. Tim says they had a big iridescent shark. Yeah, iridescent sharks were absolutely a thing in the 1980s and the 1990s for sure. But when it came to barbs, the only barbs I really remember were the tinfoil barb and the tiger barb. And people knew the tinfoil barb was generally going to be too big. So if you wanted barbs, it was mostly the tiger barb. And I still think to this day, that's why barbs in general get such a bad reputation, because so many people kept mostly tiger barbs in a tank that was too small and numbers that were too low. And they would start picking one another off and fin nipping other fish. So they kind of just say, oh, all barbs are bad. And it's like, well, no, that's not the case. It's just tiger barbs can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. I think, to me, the more interesting shift lately has been that shift towards nano and more of the gallery style tanks. I mean, I don't know if people haven't been in the hobby all that long, just how much things have shifted when you look. And I think really what you have is, by the late 00s, you're starting to see social media. So people are sharing information. You don't just have to rely on a pet store. People are putting things out there that, for the most part, are more reliable. And then they're experimenting a little bit more. And certainly by the late teens and into the 20s, you're seeing the rimless tanks and that really nice aquascape look, planted tanks. You've got a lot more reliance on sand as we get into the teens and into the 20s for sure. I think people are starting to realize by that point, hey, you know what? A lot of these fish, they don't do so well on gravel, but if we switch to sand, that's a little bit more conducive to their health, a little bit more natural look, and there's been a big push to that, and that's, you have a much greater reliance on LED lights in the teens, right, for sure. And so that shift, you go from incandescent light bulbs to fluorescent lights, which I thought was a big shift, from fluorescent lights to the LEDs. And I'm going to say something that's a little bit controversial, I think, but I don't think the shift from the fluorescent light to the LED is as drastic as when we went from incandescent to fluorescent, because we were sold this, we were told that the LED lights were going to be these things that would last forever. They use virtually no energy. And yes, they use less energy than a fluorescent light, but in terms of them lasting forever, I think the higher end lights, they mostly do, but they're also pretty expensive, right? Now, the one thing you can do with LEDs that you really couldn't do well with the incandescents is you can change the spectrum. You can change the intensity a little bit easier. They do, for the most part, last longer, but I don't think they are as bulletproof as people made them out to be. I mean, just looking at our fish room, we've had a number of them just like, oh, okay, they're done. And I mean, they're done, right? It's not like a fluorescent light bulb where it's like, okay, this thing's getting dimmer, starting to flicker now. You got to go replace the light bulb or the little fuse. LEDs is like, oh, this whole thing is garbage. So, a lot more Cory cats, a lot more nano. Nano is, especially the last, probably 8 years, a lot more nano. You're seeing a lot of the rasboras. Again, not that they weren't around earlier, but rasboras are really popular. The smaller tetras are really popular. The dwarf cichlids have been an extremely popular thing, and just a lot more fish availability in general. I mean, we walk around the Quad City Swap, and you're looking around and go, holy cow, everything you could ever want is there.
What's another really huge addition? Like a Focus. Like you said, they've been around, but really came into their own.
Fish-wise?
Yeah.
I don't know. You can tell us.
It's the gateway fish.
Oh, bettas.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot more variety. I mean, bettas had been around for a long time, but the variety, but that comes with its own set of problems, right? So as we shift and we get into the certainly the teens and the 20s, you're starting to see a lot more inbreeding with guppies, because now they're like, okay, let's breed all these different varieties, and sometimes you get some bad things with that. Bettas have been far less hardy than they used to be, but we've learned a lot more too, right? When it comes to fish keeping in general, which I think is pretty darn cool. We've learned from one another, we've learned from social media, we've learned how the best practices. Now, here's the big question. Where's fish keeping going? What's the next thing? What do you guys think? This is a question for you, right? The question for all of you out there is, that was a quick summary, and I've left out, I'm sure, a number of things. And again, people who are around, you're probably like, what about this? What about this? That's why you're here. But where is fish keeping going next?
I know where I want it to go, or where I possibly think that it will be going.
All right, hold on 1 second. Hold that thought.
Oh,
Where it says, how do you become a prime timer? There is a link at the top of I pinned a link where you can click on that, and you can become a prime timer if you so desire.
Oh
okay,
my
go ahead.
gosh. Who remembers Abraham that lived in a bowl? That was Different Strokes, wasn't it?
Is it?
Wasn't that his fish, Abraham?
I have
Or am I
no
misremembering?
idea.
Because he had, what was his name? What you talking about, Willis? What was his name? The little one, the little boy.
Wait, Different Strokes was the name of the show. Willis, Mr. Drummond.
And I've got the name Arnold stuck in my head, and I can't move it out of the way to find out his name.
I don't
What's
know,
his
but
name?
now I'm just thinking
Y'all are going to know. Somebody's going to know. Mr. Rogers, that's right. Oh, my gosh. So, wait,
Yeah.
running water. Do you know the fun fact about Mr. Rogers?
What?
Okay, he had a goldfish. I think it was a goldfish. And do you know that Mr. Rogers would answer every single letter that he received? Well, he received a letter once from a girl who was blind but liked to listen to his show. And she was afraid. Was the fish's name Dorothy? Or maybe somebody else. Might have been Dorothy. was afraid that the fish wasn't getting fed, wanted to make sure it was okay. So she was like, can you let me know when you feed your Dorothy? No, that was Elmo's fish, I think. Anyways, the fish. And so from that point on, every single time he fed the fish, he would say, I'm feeding the fish right now, or however he said it.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that nice? Mr. Rogers was such a great guy.
Leslie, Kmart had the best sub sandwiches, and they also had tropical fish.
Kmart.
Do I remember? Do I know that?
I know that from...
I don't know if the Kmart's by our house had tropical fish. Walmart's did. The worst I ever saw was, what was the other, not Target, but there was another discount store. That
Venture.
Was no. It was
Venture's
more recent.
Air?
It was more recent than that. We walked in there, and actually, I had never done this before, but I remember being very angry. We walked into a store that was kind of like a Walmart. It was not Walmart, and they were selling fish, and all their tanks were absolutely destroyed, and they were keeping...
Meyer.
It was Meyer. Okay, that's...
I remember that.
Yeah, I don't think they sell fish
awful.
anymore, but I lost
hope
my
they
stuff,
don't.
and I don't normally
Yeah.
do that, but I remember, and I didn't lose my stuff to the wonderful little, the teenager that was working there. It wasn't his fault, but I said, hey, do you have who's in charge of this? He's like, oh, I'll go get my manager. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a good discussion about, they were keeping like cichlids with guppies, and fish were dead. It was like a disaster. I could not believe. It was like one of those things where if you could call the fish cops, I would have done it.
Wouldn't that be amazing if you could? Although
Call the fish cops.
there'd probably be a lot of like bad calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woolworths?
Woolworths. Do you remember Woolworths?
I remember
Woolworths.
One.
In
Oh,
the
Gravedigger,
in the town,
absolutely.
in the
Noah's
city.
Ark chain stores. We had one in Hillside
Yes.
Mall, and we had another
We had
one
one.
in Northbrook Mall. I got quite a North Park Mall in Villa Park, and then we had in Hillside Mall in Hillside. And I used to go to both of those. Here's a funny story. Okay, I'm a kid. I'm probably in 8th grade. My parents are separated at the time. My dad picks me up. He's like, where do you want to go? I'm like, hey, can we go to Hillside Mall? I want to go to Noah's Ark Pet Store. I want to get a snake. So he takes me there. My parents were really, really cool about basically letting me have almost whatever I wanted. We'd go to the creek as a kid. We would come home with buckets full of stuff. One time I caught 8 frogs, 3 turtles, and I had tanks. I had everything set up for him. But anyway, so I tell my dad I want a snake. So he takes me to Noah's Ark Pet Store in Hillside, Illinois, when it was still open. I get a ball python. I bring this thing home. I set up this, I set up the whole tank. I got the heat rock, all that stuff. My mom comes home. My mom did not like snakes. Now, I could get snakes from the
I don't
creek,
blame her.
but they always stayed in a tank in the garage during the summer. Then when it got cold, like right around late summer, early fall, before it got too cold, I would let them back out again, and they could go do what snakes do for the wintertime. So, because you can't leave them in a tank in a garage.
They
would
fly
die.
south.
So my mom comes home and freaks out. What is this thing? She was not having it. And so, of course, I'm putting up a big stink as a kid because I got this snake and I'm super excited about it. She had to call my grandparents, and my grandparents come to the house and like, you cannot have this snake in the house. And then eventually I had to get rid of it. But yeah, Noah's Ark Pet Stores, those were pretty cool. There was
my
a
gosh.
lot of really cool pet stores by us.
Ted Riggs says that Stratford Square had a Noah's Ark. Stratford Square is no more. It's rubble.
Yeah, it's a
And I
big
just
pile of-
drove by it tonight, and they have, this is crazy, I don't know why, but the back half of the parking lot,
Yeah.
where Carson Peary Scott and between that and Sears, it's like, it looks like dirt almost, and there's light posts, like brand new light posts out there. I'm like, why?
That's pretty cool.
It's weird.
JR, thank you. Thank you for doing that. JR gifted 5 Primetime Aquatics memberships. That was awesome of you. I really appreciate you doing that. Thank you for doing that.
Aww.
All right, hold on. I'm way behind in this chat. So, by the way, now is a great time to feel free to ask questions. Vince, angels everywhere. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, angelfish in the 70s and the 80s. That was the thing, man. There wasn't nearly the variety. You basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only angels I remember from the 70s and most of the 80s, at least in our area, were just your standard angelfish. There was the marbles. There were black angelfish, and you either had standard tail or veil tail. That was about it from my... the Ultims were out there, but almost nobody had those, at least nobody that I knew.
You should read Noelle's comment.
Well, I don't know where that comment is, so you go ahead and read it off.
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay. This is from Noelle. Gee, Jason, you would have thought that experience of the guys buying pets without mom knowing would have taught you something before you and the boys came home with that dog.
Valid point.
Thank you.
But you know what?
That
In
is
my
valid.
defense, it was such a long period of time between the snake and coming home with the dog that I just forgot about it. And plus, it was exciting buying the dog. And hey, you know what? That dog is a great dog. He's like right up
Now
there.
he's
Top
like
2 dogs of all
Old
time.
and tired.
He just sits there and he'll put his head right on your lap and he's like,
Uh-huh.
just pet me. And then he's a great dog. Boy says, do you remember in the late 1990s something called a blue shark? I don't remember that specific name. A blue shark? I mean, we talked about the black sharks before, which was just, those things were mean. It was basically like a red-tailed shark, only all black. And oh my gosh, those were meaner than in my opinion, they were meaner than the red-tailed sharks. The other one, oh my gosh, by the 1980s, I wanted so bad clown loaches.
Really?
My uncle had clown loaches. I think I will always have clown loaches in the fish room. We got the big ones back here, and we got 3 little guys there going to the swap. But I bring those in periodically, and I love it.
Here they are. They're like, boop,
S.
boop.
Martin says, got fish from Kmart in the 1970s. Yep. When were shrimp introduced? That is a great question. So
Ooh.
I can tell you,
That's a great question.
from my fish keeping experience, I don't know when they were introduced, but I know they didn't get popular probably until the mid-teens, right? Where
Yeah.
you had like Flip Aquatics and everybody coming out. It was really a niche thing before that. I think they were. I mean, it was very. You really didn't see them at too many pet stores before the mid-teens. So that's a more relatively recent. That's a great question. Same thing with most of the snails, like the mystery snails, nearite snails. Not that they weren't around before then, but they just weren't much of a thing, I think, until the early to mid-teens. And I also think that all coincided with the move to nano, because you had a lot more people potentially in apartments who wanted to keep fish, and it just kind of worked out that way.
All right, I got a question for you. Let's see if you get this. It's really a 50-50 shot, which is going to be embarrassing for all of us. But all right. So Slamboy says, I had a ball python named Monty. Why did he name him Monty?
That's the easiest question in the world. Monty Python?
Oh, good.
I mean,
didn't
I
know
don't
if you'd
watch
get
the
that.
show, but
I didn't even know if
yeah,
you'd get that.
So that humor never resonated with me, but there was
No,
another.
he's-
Okay, who knows?
He doesn't get British everything. I
No.
get British everything.
But there was a show that my friend used to love to watch, and when I would sleep over at his house as a
Oh,
kid,
no.
we had to watch this show. And all I remember is it was a British show, and one of
I
the
bet you I
guys
know what it
had
is.
3 stars stuck in his forehead, like little metal stars. What was the name of that show? Who knows? Because that's going to drive me crazy. And it's right on the tip of my tongue. But he was like, I don't know if his name was Vinny. He had like a black spiky haircut. And he had 3 metal stars in his forehead. It was a British show. He used to think it was the funniest thing ever. And I was like, this show's stupid. But
I have no idea.
yeah, the eyebrow Joanna gave you. Hey, I'm used to it.
You should be used to it.
Yep. Oh, that's going to absolutely drive me nuts. Groupers were a thing back then too. Here's your 400-pound fish. Don't worry, it'll just grow to the size of the tank. Yeah, I know nothing about saltwater. So like the saltwater trends that happened back in the day, I don't know. Dragon says preservation of threatened species. That's where we're headed in the future, I sure hope so.
Yeah, and I think that's
is, yeah.
like recently, really. I mean, with all the fish clubs, like
Yeah, the
really
CARES
looking for
thing,
the
CARES
yeah,
programs,
mhm.
absolutely. Dog, thank you again for the super chat. If I were to do Calvis and daffodils in a 40 breeder, how many of each would you say? I'd go with a half a dozen Calvis, and with the daffodils, probably the same. And then again, you still have space in there. If you go 6 and 6 and you want to do some type of a shell dweller, you want to do some type of a rock dweller, you still got space to do that. But then at least you're leaving yourself space in case some of the daffodils do survive. That would be something to consider. Polar blue cichlids, yeah, those are pretty cool. That's a great one, Air. If we're talking about where things are headed in the future, less equipment, more naturalistic, and less reliance on water changes, and we're already there. I think that is a trend that has happened over certainly the last 5 or 6 years. At least that's when it's really come into its own. you got Father Fish out there, you got LRB, and they're doing that work, and they're showing people how you don't necessarily need all the things, right? You got a light, you've got some ability to control temperature. The filter thing is, it really depends on your setup, right? I've said this a million times. You can do filterless setups. We've done them. We've got 4 filterless tanks upstairs right now, filterless and very little water change. And when we had the old YouTube studio, when we were doing the live streams, those 4 8-gallon tanks behind us got basically 1 or 2, maybe 2 water changes in a couple years that they were up there. And the filters basically didn't run anymore because they were making too much noise. I unplugged them and never plugged them back in again. So, yeah, Gary Coleman.
Thank you.
Arnold Jackson.
So, Arnold. His name was Arnold?
Arnold's black.
Arnold and
goldfish.
Willis?
I think so.
His name was Arnold? Wow.
I feel
You
bad
know when
about
you
myself
have like
because I used to watch
like
that
a
show.
brain cramp where like
Yeah.
when you say a word and you're like, that doesn't sound right or something, that doesn't look like it's spelled right.
Yeah.
Arnold. I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, I am.
But Dorothy, I
Plainfield
think,
Miner
was
still has fish.
Dorothy was Elmo's fish, I think. What was Mr. Rogers' fish? I gotta
I
look
have
that
no
up.
idea.
All right,
Hold on,
I
I'm
need to
trying
know.
Scroll down here.
That's fine while you're scrolling, but while you're scrolling,
like way off in the land of.
I want to know the year of everybody's first tank.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah, definitely. I want to know that too.
I'm trying to think of the first year. What
Dina
mine
says, I
have
had a
been.
ball python, 8 frozen rats. Yeah, we actually. So fun fact. At one point, if you've been around the channel for a while, you'll know that we had a little lizard area in the fish room where we had a ball python, but it was a really cool one. I think it was a pieball, right?
I don't know. What
And
it
then we
was. It
had
was
the
yuck.
fire skink. We had a couple of geckos, and what was this other snake that we had down here?
I don't know.
It was a really cool one. It was a little bit faster than a ball python. Oh, it's going to drive me crazy. The boys did that. And then eventually they just kind of, we cared for those pets, and they lived their life, and we didn't really replace them.
Oh, Dragon says I don't think Mr. Rogers named his fish. Okay, that's quite
See?
possible.
There you go.
Oh wow! All right, we've got a whole bunch of years now.
Oh, cool. Michelle, happy birthday. Birthday's on Saturday and GCC on Sunday. That's
right. You're
like
my
a
birthday
really
buddy.
Good,
Happy birthday,
good time.
Michelle!
very nice.
Yay!
Jay Oliver's in the house. What's going on? Celebrating 41
Hey,
months of
Jay
being a prime
Oliver.
timer. Hey, Fish family, good seeing you guys. By the way, there you go. There's your guppy source. Jay Oliver.
Yes.
He really, really, really cares about the types of guppies that he's reproducing. So really, really solid source there for guppies.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Just an outstanding dude. Like really awesome guy. Cody, thank you so much for the super chat. 90s kid here. My mom was the one who got me into fish tanks. She always had barbs, live bears, and tetras. Shout out, Mom. That's cool.
Shout out to Mom.
It's funny because I talk to the boys, and like I said, they're not. Eli's an employee at this point. Luke is so busy with school and stuff. He doesn't really work down here much. But when I ask them, so sometimes I ask them a question like, hey, when you have your own place, what type of, I don't even say, are you going to have fish? I'm like, what type of fish tank are you going to have? But they have an answer. Like, oh, I'm going to do this. I might not have as many, but they're like, oh, I might just have one big one and do this. But they both have an answer.
What specifically?
So Eli likes angelfish.
Really?
And then I don't remember what Luke said, but it was very interesting that they actually were like, oh, yeah, we're going to.
You never know.
I know. Yep. Sometimes you just make it your own, right?
Right.
Oh, thank you, Vince. If anybody's going to know it, The Young Ones. That was the name of the show with the dude who had the 3 stars in his forehead. Yeah, they're like
Way to
little
go,
metal
Vince.
press-on stars. It was this type of stars where you would put it in like a denim jacket and then you would fold over the
Yeah.
metal pieces. I think they just glued those to his forehead. But
Or they could have been
The
gold
Young
stars
Ones.
that you got on a
Now,
paper.
here's the question. Did you actually like that show? Because it just wasn't for me.
Well,
wasn't
you
for
don't
me.
really generally get British humor, which is
No.
tragic.
Scott, that's a great question. When did those bubble walls become popular? 1980s for sure. You'd get so what would happen is they would sell these really long air stones, and then you would bury them under the gravel towards the back of your tank, and they would do their thing. I still like that look. I still think it's pretty relaxing. Dragon Dad had it too. The Young Ones, very good. Nice. Okay, we got a whole bunch of
Wow.
people. Apparently, there was a whole bunch of people here in the 1980s or whatever that, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. So, Michelle brought up, what was up with the painted glassfish? All right, how are the painted glassfish any different than the glow?
Because the painted glassfish they're not, I don't think they are genetically modified like the glowfish are.
They're
certainly
just
not yet.
injected?
I don't, I don't know if that's the case either.
Then how are they?
I haven't even seen those in over a decade. I'm not even. Are
They
they still
look
around?
unnaturally.
Yeah, but I don't know if those things are even still around.
I don't
know.
know. That I think that was a way back
Yeah.
thing.
Okay, Beth, could I do 8 embers, 8 chilies, 8 green neons, and a heavily planted 29? Oh, for sure. That's a
Could do more.
great mix. That's going to be, yeah, you could do.
Like the chilies?
The chilies, you could easily double that number. In fact, I would. I would probably
Yeah.
do 10 embers, at least 15 chilies, 2 green neons. Just kidding. No, your 8 green neons is great. And then the 6 coolies and a 29 planted for sure. That's going to
Yeah.
be a striking tank. You really nailed it with the color combinations there.
Yeah.
That's gonna be
That's
cool.
yummy.
Oh. In the future, will the fish swim around us or no glass? Now that I had a dream that happened one time. Actually more than one time. I've had dreams where my fish are out of the tank and they're just kind of floating around in the air. And I'm like, oh, I got to get these guys back in the tank. But then the tank itself doesn't have any water. So I'm putting them back in the tank, but they're just kind of like flying around.
I think I've had something like a dream
Yeah.
like that. Really weird. Or how about if you could give your little fish like a bubble, like a little clamshell bubble filled with water that would like float and they can go wherever they want in
Yeah.
your house. That would be cool.
That would be pretty cool. Sideways. All right, so here's the time: 76, 68, 87. Very cool.
Oh.
So we got some old school people up in here.
Wait, Lynn, I think I did a screenshot so I wouldn't lose it. She had a funny comment here.
Yinzer says, getting a 125 gallon. I've been thinking a lot about ideas for it. I was wondering if each of you could say what you would do if money wasn't a factor. Seasoned fish keeper. I can tell you right now what I would do. If money was not a factor, I'd do Ultim Angels. I think that would be an absolutely striking fish tank. So maybe some Ultim Angels, some type of really, really nice Cory cat. Maybe like what I do? The Cory cats that you like. Those red ones?
Fireballs.
Fireballs. Ultim
Dun,
Angels
dun,
and
dun,
Fireball
dun,
Cory
dun.
cats. Yeah, good luck with that. That's going to be a lot of money. Look at all these. Man, there's such
you wanna know
cool.
what I
There's a
wanna
lot
do?
of old schoolers. Yeah, I do. We do. We want to know.
A 125. All right, I would definitely make that bad boy into a paludarium with anableps.
Ooh, okay. That's a legit.
And I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Can you give him some buddies, like some green neons, maybe?
Ooh, I don't know about that.
Right? I don't know either.
Yeah. No, you can't because anableps are brackish. So you'd have to do. Yeah, there's still some.
There would be
options
options.
there. Yeah, but anableps are a brackish fish, so you
Okay.
might want to think about maybe some type of a puffer. Medium-sized puffer would be kind of cool. Maybe if that would work. I don't know. Don't quote me on that one.
I have to think who they put them
Zoosloth.
with.
I had an iguana too. I did too. I was given 2 iguanas by a person I knew who had way too many pets, and the mom was like, yeah, get rid of some of these. So I had 2 very large iguanas. They were great. They would eat tofu and fruit and vegetables.
That's
And it was
easy.
yeah, but they were big. Really cool fish. And I did get smacked a couple times with their tails. That does not feel good. They can whoop you. I mean, that tail is no joke. Thank you, Air Warrior. Corn snake. Yep, that was the other snake that we had. I love that. I love that you guys can read my mind that doesn't function anymore.
Lynn, just so you know, is a member for 54 months.
No way.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks for those eggs.
Yo, those eggs are making my day. So, yeah, Lynn has got some really, and it's so exciting because you open up a container like, oh, they got some blue ones and some brown ones.
know,
and
that's gonna
I
be
know they're
fun
all
for
different chickens
Easter.
and stuff. But yeah, so good.
So she said, I worked at a pet store in the mall in the 70s, sold tons of aquariums and fish. My first tank was first grade in 1965.
So can you tell me who said that?
Lynn.
Oh, Lynn. So come on, Lynn, tell us, because you've got a way better frame of reference for the 1970s. What did you see in the 1970s that was like really a thing?
Yeah, like
in
what
the
were you
70s?
selling? Like what was
Yeah,
everybody buying?
We need to hear it
Yeah.
because you were like in it. That's awesome.
In it.
Julia says 1973 first tank 1973 except the goldfish every year from the county fair. That was during the mid and late 60s. Yeah, they still in the 80s. I remember going to those county fairs with the ping pong ball, and they had the goldfish in the blue water, and it was fun. It was fun winning those things. I don't remember them actually living all that long, but it was fun at the time.
That's
I mean,
funny.
not a great thing.
Noel says circa 1979 to nothing until around 2015.
Okay.
It's quite the gap.
Wow.
And Vince is 1984. What a great year.
Yeah, you guys have got there's some
Uh,
awesome fish keeping diversity going on here.
Lonnie says 2025. Welcome.
Nice. Glad you're here.
Hey.
You're in the right place. Look at all
Yes.
these people have got tons and tons and tons of experience. That is really, really cool. Very nice. Jonathan says, do you think fish will be a more internationally regulated resource in the future with possible trade agreements and quotas to maintain populations in their native habitat? I think it's already happened, believe it or not. I'm not sure that the regulation is there. If you, really good podcast, if you go back a couple weeks ago on the Tank Talk podcast, we talked with Project Piaba, and Project Piaba is exactly what you're talking about. They're an organization that is dedicated to preserving fish in certain regions of South America. And they talk about how it's actually a benefit to those regions to sustainably catch wild caught fish and why that is. But it's already started to happen. And I think the other aspect of that is the way the fish industry works now is so many fish are being bred in Indonesia and Vietnam and Singapore and other places where, especially tetras and barbs, and you've got all these different types of fish where you're not. And one of the things we talk about with that Project Piaba in that Project Piaba interview is it is actually starting to have a major impact on the wild caught fish industry, and sometimes in a bad way. So that is, it's been happening. Because now you can breed these fish in a climate, and you're not pulling them out of the wild nearly as much. Now there are still fish that are exceedingly difficult to breed in any type of captivity, and so we have to kind of be careful of that. A lot of the Cares species, and so especially the Godeids from Mexico and Central America, those are being, the habitats are definitely under stress. So there are a lot of people keeping those fish. The only problem is with the Godeids or the Goodeids, however you want to pronounce it, they're not often the best looking fish in the world, so people are not as interested in them. But yeah, it's starting to shift. Great question. How do you guys get rid of fish tanks you no longer need? Well, luckily we have an outlet, and that is our swaps that we go to. So I usually just bring them there and sell them at a nice big discount. If I didn't have that, Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp would be something you could do. And quite frankly, if they're small tanks and I didn't want to deal with that, I probably wouldn't. I would just put them on the curb, let somebody grab it.
I would probably go and get it and hide it out back.
Knowing you, yeah, because
I can make it into a garden or something.
My wonderful wife is an interesting human being. Our neighbors, our next door neighbors,
Thank you.
were moving, and they've been our next door neighbors for 20 something years, and they moved to Tennessee, as pretty much everybody in Illinois is doing lately. And I happened to look out, and they're just kind of clearing. They actually sold their house fully furnished, which was like, man,
Yeah.
that was awesome. But they did put in the garbage a couple things. One was like a ladder. There was a couple other things. And I looked at it briefly, and I'm like, someone's going to take that. Like 20 minutes later, I'm like, oh, wow, man, I told Joanna, I'm like, yeah, somebody took that ladder and a couple other things. And she's like, she didn't say anything. I'm like, where are they? She's like, oh, I just put them in the garage. I'm going to use them for something on the other channel. And sure enough, there they were. So she goes and picks stuff out of the garbage that our neighbors put out there, and I just wonder what they're thinking.
But wait, the last thing I got from them was a chair, the one that's right up, like in front of my little desk area.
Yeah.
I scored a nice chair from them, and a couple weeks ago when I was driving home, on the side of the road was another chair that I could use for the lounge, and it matches perfectly with the desk.
Yeah,
I was pretty excited.
that's pretty cool. Good for you. Okay, so let me see something. What is going on? My situation here is so totally screwed up. All of my chats are like pretty much frozen.
All right, well, listen to this question.
Okay.
Steve asks, I have a 10-gallon heavily planted dirted tank. Currently have 9 embers, 1 nearite snail, 2 African dwarf frogs. All are happy and levels look good. Could I add a honey gourami? Would he bug the
10
frogs?
gallon. No, I think that'd be okay. I would do it.
Okay.
Oh, Dragon Den. That's a great one. The glass cats. Yeah, those were so popular back in the 80s. You're 100% right. Yep. So true. So this is the thing that is so annoying to me because I can only scroll so far up, and now I don't know. People are thanking Dennis. We appreciate you, Dennis. Yeah, Dennis, we do appreciate you.
Oh, that was a while ago. Did you not say thank you?
No, because my stupid chats are all frozen. Did Dennis do a Dennis thing?
Yeah.
Dennis,
I
thank
think
you
so.
so much for doing a Dennis thing. I can't, like I said, this chat thing doesn't, hold on. It doesn't allow me to do what I want to gall dang darn do. Oh, there we go. Now this chat, we've got 5 chats open.
Featherfin Film says 2020 seems to be the Hillstream Loach decade. Oh yeah.
For crying out loud.
Those
yeah,
are like
everybody.
the in fish right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. I actually I was showing on a video today to prime timers. There are 2, I don't remember the specific type. I've got the glass cats in that 125, but then I've got 2, I didn't tell you that. There are 2 glass cats in there that are different. They're the striped variety. I thought I put them in there and they died, and all of a sudden they were out eating the other day. Today and then yesterday.
I love this. You're going to give me the case of the giggles like the rest of the night. And I'm tempted to do it because it's so catchy. Are you ready?
Yeah.
This is from my new best friend, Tim Adams. New channel, Dumpster Diving with Joanna.
Oh, jeez. No, it'd be garbage picking our neighbor's garbage.
Garbage picking, dumpster diving,
so
whatever.
I used to do that. Dragon, you said you grew up really poor. I always scanned all the garbage that was on my street. So I was dumbfounded the first time I made him stop. I could grab something. Yeah, when I was a kid, that was a thing, man. I mean, me and my friends, we would go out and we'd go garbage picking. It was, I mean, it was like finding
treasures.
We would find games, we'd find bikes, all kinds of stuff, like old sports equipment. Mm-hmm. One time, I was coming home from school, and I found this off-road tire. Like, it must have been off of like a pickup truck. And I picked this thing up. And I was in 2nd grade because I remember the school I was at. I was only there for 1st and 2nd grade. And so I get this tire up. And of course, to me, it seemed really big. It was probably just a normal sized tire. And I'm pushing it all the way down the block home because I thought my dad would want it. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I'm like, oh, it's a tire. My dad will probably want this. I get home. I get about 4 houses away. And finally, it's too much. I can't keep pushing this tire. So I just kind of lay it down in somebody else's garbage. I get home, and because the tire was right up against my chest, all my chest and my pants were filthy, and I was wearing like a tan shirt and like tan pants. And I get home, my mom's like, she's really mad. She's like, "What happened to your clothes?" And I'm like, somebody pushed me down in the street. Because I didn't want to get in trouble.
Aww, but all you were trying to do was something nice
for your dad. All I was trying to do was give my dad a tire, but I got
and
too tired.
You couldn't even do that. Oh.
No. And then I almost got a whooping because
that's an awful story.
Yeah, I know, but hey. Zeusless, I've been printing.
Zeuslia. It's probably Zeuslia.
Anyway,
correct me if I'm wrong.
34 years in printing. Yeah, we know that life. We
met in the printing
I was in purchasing, and then I was a commercial print estimator for a number of years. I have since forgotten every single thing I know about it. I actually have nightmares at night sometimes that I'm back in that industry, but that's not the nightmare. The nightmare is they put me right back in an estimating thing in a cubicle, and they're giving me all these jobs to do, and I don't remember the layouts. I literally don't remember anything.
You can't do your job.
I can't do my job, and it's very, very stressful. Okay. The Zen says, I love my reticulated tiger hill streams. Yep. But a lot of the fancy ones coming out are not that pretty. Yeah, and they're expensive too. Some of those fancy hill stream loaches are very, very expensive.
Groshkill says apartment complex dumpsters were the best. Yes.
Oh yeah, because everybody's moving every month, so you never know what you're going to find. They're like half broken lamps, and
or even just like right next to it, because they're like, man, it's too big. Or they just leave it as basically like a shopping area. You know, like the apartment then knows, like, hey, if you have anything extra, put it there. It's a shopping area.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just realized I had a scene where I had this picture of a 1980s
Oh, that's cool.
or 19.
Look at
Probably
that.
more like 1990s because there's
Yeah.
actually some rocks in there. And in the
Yeah.
80s, sometimes you do that, but sometimes not. But anyway, there's a picture. How about that?
Hmm.
Okay, hold on a second here. Now I am all the way at the bottom of the chat, so that's pretty cool. Now I can scroll back up. So now if you've got recent questions, I can answer them. What?
Zeus Leah, plant manager. Assume at the
Nice.
print company.
Very cool.
Cool. Very cool.
White graphics. Yeah, we were at Berlin Industries.
Back in the
Back in the
day,
day.
Berlin.
And then they got bought out by I was gone by that point, but
Yeah.
American Litho bought them out, and they're still there. And from what I understand, they're very successful, which is cool. Okay, hold on. Now I'm scrolling. Oh yeah, Jose, that's for sure. I think YouTubers influenced everybody to have shell dweller tank in their fish room.
Because you were influenced as well. Or you influenced yourself.
I think I influenced myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of the first tanks. I was like, okay, let me put some of those in there. I think I saw them at a pet store. I'm like, oh, those are cool.
I remember the day that we were at Aquatics, and you're like, man, I really want that 50 lowboy. I'm like, okay, because I really loved it too.
Yeah.
And now all I want is a mini lowboy
Yeah.
someday.
Yeah, that was a big fad, I would say, teens into...
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that fad kind of went shoo, shoo, and then right down again because they just start breeding like crazy. And then people are like, what am I going to do with these fish? And everybody gets in the same situation. I'm still surprised when people say, hey, for multis, I got to pay 15, 20, 25 bucks a piece or more. I'm like, why? In the Chicagoland area, that's like a $3 fish, man. I mean, because once they start breeding, they just become, and don't get me wrong, if you haven't had shell dwellers, you absolutely should keep them. They are out there. That's why I still have them, right? That 50-gallon lowboy in that side of the fish room, I can confidently say that is the only fish tank in our entire fish room that has never changed since it's been up.
Mm-hmm.
At one point we had 80 aquariums up in the fish room. That is, I mean, I'm trying to think if that's a lie, and no, it is the only fish tank in the entire house that has not changed. It's always been, it was set up as a multi-shell dweller tank, and it's still there.
Yeah, you're right.
Isn't that crazy? Every other tank has changed, most of them multiple times, in terms of what kind of thing we're going for.
Now I was thinking, what's the second oldest?
In terms of
Like
what's
that has
been set
not
up,
been changed.
probably the bottom 125, because it's always been kind of a odd mix of fish. So the fact that it's still an odd mix of fish, but not the same fish, I guess, is
Because the
weird.
shrimp tank has not changed that much since we set it up, right?
No, it has, because it was. I had the Java rice fish in there. Then I also had Meleagris in that tank, shell dwellers. I had Calvus in there at one point. I had Severums in there at one point to grow out. So it wasn't, there was a lot
We'll
of stuff in there
scratch
before.
that then.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Crazy says, do you guys have issues with lots of bubbles in your lowboy? I have sponge filter rated for 20 gallons, but I have a 20 long and I have lots of bubbles on the surface. So surface bubbles, like if the bubbles are on the surface and they're not popping, often that can be due to either excessive proteins or excessive lipids that are settling at the top. And you'll start to see that those bubbles that just don't pop, that can happen. A lot of times that's due to the food that you're feeding. So if the foods are extra oily, that can certainly be a factor. Holy cow. There's still 27 bucks at Aquatics. I love Aquatics Unlimited. I think that is...
We haven't been
if-
there in a long time.
No, and we need to
You
go
owe me a
because they have
trip.
since updated that store, and we absolutely need to go there
Yes.
because it has been a while. Those were Aquatics Unlimited and Fish Factory were two of the first fish store tours that we ever did on this channel, and but 27 bucks is insane. I'm sorry, that is absolutely just ridiculously insane to pay that much money for. I mean, at this point, it'd be so much easier just to go online, and I'm sure there are people on Aquabid or wherever selling those things for $5-6 a piece, and even after you get done with shipping, it's still gonna be a whole lot cheaper. Crazy says, speaking about lowboys, I have a 20-gallon long with a, wait, did I literally just read this? No. 20-gallon long with a 20-gallon rated sponge filter. I have lots of air bubbles. I did just read this. I did it to myself.
I was waiting.
No, because there's, oh, no. I didn't. There's up here, there's this comment, and then there's this one. It's the same thing. It was just posted twice. I didn't do that.
Kind of. It's the same question.
No. It's not like what you do to me. Yeah. Dory says, yeah, Milwaukee's close enough to Chicago. I'm surprised that there's a price difference.
Yeah, that's...
I'll tell you right now, if you really want shell dwellers, then you come down to a GCCA. It's in Northbrook. It's not that far away. It's worth the drive at that point. You're going to save all kinds of, and you're going to get a whole mess load of fish that are going to be a lot cheaper. So you make a day of it.
A whole mess load.
Jose says, some YouTubers seem to pick more drab fish just because they're less common choice. Like they think the more colorful versions are played out. Yeah, I don't know. I just try to keep fish that I like. It's easy to follow. I understand if there are people on social media doing that. It can be one of those things where you're trying to be different and do other things, and you kind of get caught up in it. But I found it's just easier. After all, it's your own hobby. Keep the fish that you like to keep for the reasons you want to keep them, and don't worry about what other people think, right? I mean, to me, platies are some of the most beautiful fish out there. They got great color. They're peaceful. They get along well. Keep them in a 10, 20 gallon tank. You're fine. You'll see babies sometimes. And then you talk to people like, platies, that's just a common beginner fish. I'm like, yeah, but look how cool they are too. That was another one. I mean, the black wag platy, holy cow. That was such a popular fish back in the 70s and 80s. Everybody had those back then.
Everybody's doing it.
This guy says, oh no, have you tried any of the swaps? Yeah, definitely. That's the way to go.
Michelle says that they went to Aquatics Unlimited at the end of February, that we need to go there because that's where she found the blue rasboras.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we've had them too.
Wait, how are they doing for you?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know that as well.
Because they didn't do
kind of
well for us,
fade
but
away on us.
I love them and I want to try again.
Yeah. Lonnie says, how many Neocaridina shrimp? Oh, to seed a 150 gallon tank. Get 20.
I was going to say 3.
But I mean, if you're looking to fill the tank up, they will do it. It'll take a while, but I mean, you'll have thousands and thousands in a 150 gallon tank if that's what you want. Then it says $7 for the Maltese down in Tampa. That's a reasonable price. That's especially if it's retail. Because I get it. The swap pricing is always going to be lower than retail because retail's got overhead, and that's okay.
Oh, Vince liked the video with the darters.
Yeah, that's
Thank
a great
you.
fish.
Aren't they? Oh,
I'm actually surprised that those, like the rainbow shiners, have become more popular. I'm surprised that we don't see a lot more darters out there.
We should. You should do something about it. Figure it out. Get some.
Figure it out, huh?
I want that.
Okay.
I want
Mike,
that.
thank you so much for the super chat. I didn't see a comment. Joanna, if you see a comment there, please read it. But thank you. Really appreciate it. Doris says, speaking of the swaps, I missed the Quad Cities last weekend. Any thoughts on what you're going to be bringing when it starts back up? Oh, I have no idea. Because the Quad City, the next one isn't until October. So I won't even begin thinking about those fish coming in until August. So it just depends on what's out there and what I am really interested in bringing in. I try to rotate stuff. I don't want to keep bringing the same exact things. I mean, there's some mainstays. A lot of people love the rummy nose rasboras, the galaxy rasboras. I'll always have Cory cats of some type, but I do try to rotate what I bring in and just keep it interesting and try to bring in some unusual stuff too. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it's like, ooh, this is going to take a while to get rid of these guys.
Michelle says that all of hers are alive and well.
Good.
So
good to hear.
I think we should try them again. I'm just saying.
Okay, maybe third time's a charm.
I'm just saying. Oh, and Mike 1993 says, hello there.
Hello there. Thank you.
Hello, Mike.
Oh, Crazy says, what foods do you guys recommend and how can I get rid of the surface bubbles once I change foods? So we use all Northfin foods. So we're Northfin flakes, Northfin sinking pellets, all the Northfin stuff in the world. And yeah, we don't really have those issues. But I mean, there's other, you could just try different foods. I mean, that's what we use. And then after you're doing water changes and stuff, usually those bubbles go away.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, Lynn, how's your batch of...
Batch of what?
Daphnia. How's your
Oh,
batch of
yeah.
Daphnia doing? I want to get that for my little pea puffies.
Lou, thank you very much for the super chat. Looking to get fish for my 75-gallon tank. Currently have no fish in it. Opinions on cool fish, aggressive or none. I just don't want to end up with one fish. Okay. Cool fish for a 75-gallon. Depends on how big you want to go. I like the purple spot goby. I think that would be an interesting centerpiece. But again, if you do that, you're going to have bigger fish because anything that fits in its mouth is going to go bye-bye, which means at least medium-sized tetras or barbs or larger or like rainbow fish. Rainbow fish would be pretty cool in a 75, right?
Heck
I think
yeah,
that
would
would be interesting. Adelphi cories in the on the bottom. You could do an interesting type of loach, maybe like a bird morai loach would be fun, or a group of them. They get a little bit larger, but the colors and the striping patterns I think are really, really awesome. Those are more slightly aggressive though. Purple spots, the bird morai loach. Rainbow fish are not. Rainbow fish would be a good schooling fish. Snakeskin barbs would be pretty darn awesome. What else could we do? Something a little bit different. All right, the Empire gudgeons, expensive but really cool.
Did you see Congo tetras?
Oh, Congo tetras would be nice. Yeah, that would
They're
be a really
beautiful.
nice idea.
Lots of driftwood. That would be stunning.
We still have a couple Congos in this 125 with some of the rainbow fish back there and the snakeskin barbs. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, Syncrosis, bird morai, that's a really, really cool loach. Love those guys a lot. As are the red-tailed botia. They're a little bit more shy than like your clown loaches and stuff, but I like those quite a bit. Anything else? What else? Koi swordtails would be pretty striking too. You could do angels in a 75-gallon. I would probably just do one just to be on the safe side, but maybe if you had like a nice big marble veil tail angel, might be pretty interesting. A horde of feather fin rainbows would also be cool. Yeah. Tim Adams says, yeah, the dwarf petricola especially. I mean, some of these fish, they're not necessarily, you can't put them all together, but yeah, there's a whole mess load. You could go other centerpiece fish, like some of your, it depends on your water parameters. You got softer water or like closer to neutral. A lot of your apistos would be really good options. Your checkerboard cichlids would be pretty darn cool.
I love those.
Yep. Nanochromis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nanacara. Did you already see Nanacara?
I did not say Nanacara.
Nanacara.
That would be a good one too. The Zen says, any tips for breeding botia loaches? I have never even tried. I've heard they're very difficult to breed, to do so in captivity. Yeah, I don't know of anybody who's bred them successfully in captivity. I don't try. I just bring them in, and I can honestly say of all the loaches I've ever brought in, I've never seen them have a baby.
Ooh, a quiver of featherfin rainbows.
Yeah, we already said that.
Did we?
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
say it again. Boy asked if you have a motorcycle channel.
Yes, that is true. It's funny because every once in a while I'll get comments. It's motorcycle channel is called Iron Mission, and we just started it about a month ago. Thank you to everybody who's been supporting that channel, by the way. And it's funny because I'll get comments on that channel where like they didn't know that we started that. And like, do you do fish as well?
That's right.
Yeah, she's like,
Am I losing my
it's
mind?
so cool when I get a comment. It's like, I have a 125-gallon tank and a Street Glide. I'm like, no, we're talking. That was a comment yesterday. I'm like, there we go. Yeah, that's pretty
Just
cool.
change that to some nano tanks and you're in.
No, it's
Okay,
all good.
wait. Go. There's one comment that you have to read from Jose Davila.
Okay, just read it because I don't know where it is. Just read it. Read it off your phone.
Oh, come on. I want you to read it.
I'm not going to be able to find it.
Right
This one?
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we found it. When I decided to get back into it in 2006, I went into the Dark Ocean Aquarium in San Francisco and saw green neons and German blue rams just glowing with iridescence. I had to have them. Yeah, that would be a really sweet combination. The rams are awesome.
Green neon love.
For sure.
I just needed you to read that.
All right, everybody. It is time. This has been a great conversation. You guys were awesome tonight.
Thanks for adding all the years and stuff. That's so
yeah,
cool.
that was so cool, and all the suggestions. You guys, it wasn't us this time. You guys brought it in the chat. That was a lot of fun.
Bravo.
Thank you, moderators, for hanging with us and holding down the fort for all these super chats, and for those of you who gifted the memberships and everything. And we are going to be back. We're going to be back same time, same place next Thursday. Next Thursday we do have a giveaway. I've already worked that out with Flip Aquatics. It's going to be a fun one. We've got a good quarter.
Really?
Yeah, we've got a fun quarter coming up for the Flip Aquatics giveaways, so I'm looking forward to that one next weekend.
So am I.
Thanks for being here. We will see you all next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.